Okay. Ready? And pin you, Dan. In and green. All right. Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you very much. So, many of us in our respective communities have been addressing a lot of environmental problems and having some success. Um, a common shared problem is cooking fuel. We've been working on that for about a year, and we have a very good practical solution that we're sharing now. And this presentation is to give everybody an update, also solicit input, and help lay the groundwork for moving forward. Next slide, please. Wastefree23.org. We started about a year ago. It's not an organization or an NGO. We try to facilitate a peer-to-peer crowdsource solution to significant environmental and social issues, specifically that are based around the environment. And really our key focus is to eliminate all burning, dumping, and trucking of trash. We didn't know if that was possible a year ago, but we're 100% confident that it is doable now. We've had great success in Nairobi, and it's slowly expanding around the world. And our goal is to have it expand faster, much, much faster. Our real focus is the solutions that we are involved with have to be very low cost because we only want to work on things that can be implemented worldwide quickly. And then also they need to be locally created and managed so that the communities take ownership for it, but also so the communities can be totally independent and not rely on the outside world to do anything. They can manage their waste themselves. And then permaculture partners.
Yep.
Oh, permaculture partners is Jess's group. I'm sure everybody probably knows the group better than I do. But anyway, that's who they are. You want to go to the next slide?
Yep, sure. You guys know me, so don't need to introduce me.
So just some rough numbers on cooking with wood and charcoal biomass. So a third of the world still does. It's relatively expensive. A lot of times 30, 40, 50, 60%, 80% of a family's income. Pollution is a big problem. Deforestation is a huge problem in areas that can't sustain the population. And it's not that fundamentally wood burning is bad. It's just with the population that we have now, we can't do it with 8 billion people burning wood. There's just not enough wood or atmosphere. So 100 years ago, not that big of a deal. Now it's going to destroy the planet. And some huge numbers. So 10% of the entire UN refugee budget goes to buying firewood. So it's like $1 billion they're spending a year on firewood. So there's opportunities for improvement. Next, please. So the cooking options are pretty well known. Fundamentally, it's LPG, natural gas, kerosene. The issue with those is everybody has to have a burner. They do still create pollution. Plus, there's a distribution issue. The nice thing about wood is it grows everywhere. The nice thing about the sun is it's everywhere. The gas and other things have to be transported one way or another. It's great that a lot of us live in electrified cities, but much of the world has no direct electricity, and the cost to run power lines and build um, power stations is really, really high. So that really leaves us on a practical note, looking at solar one way or another. So you flip to the next slide. So as we said, solar is everywhere, so that's a huge advantage. And there's really two approaches: solar electricity, which is probably we're most familiar with, which is the solar photovoltaic cells that go into electricity, and then it goes into whatever devices, our phones or our air conditioners or our cooktops. The other way, which actually is much more efficient, is taking the sun and taking the heat directly from the sun, concentrating it and using it for cooking, which is the mirror down below. Next one. So this is a little bit busy, but I think it makes a whole lot of sense. Is really on the left side, I guess, I know, our left. These are what the communities that we've talked to have asked for is, people need and want to cook anytime. Um, we need to address how much it costs for equipment. Does it have smoke? What's the cost for the fuel? Can you cook in the shade in a comfortable setting? Because in the middle of the summer, when out in the sun, it's brutally hot. Plus, it's not super healthy to stand out there for hours a day. Flexibility on the size of the meal. If you have family over or something, you want to be able to cook more than other times. And then how much is it really involved in the local community? So actually, why don't we start on the far right, which is wood. So wood is good, but a couple of big issues is there's smoke and the cost. And then, of course, it doesn't even include environmental damage. So while it's effective in a lot of ways, it has some huge drawbacks that we're trying to fix. So if you go strictly with the thermal concentrator, just a big mirror, it's very limited. You can't cook in the evenings or at night. Can't cook when it's cloudy. They really work great when it's clear sun, but otherwise there's not enough energy coming in the wavelengths it needs to create heat. And then you have to be in the sun for the most part. And you don't have a lot of flexibility on the size of your mirror. You just need more mirrors or a bigger mirror, but then you have the bigger one all the time. So not a lot of flexibility. So Jess was nice enough to find an article about CARE just implemented in Uganda and Bitty Bitty, I think, partnering with a company called Ikoka or some device. Anyway, it's a solar powered system, but it's super expensive because what they do is they take the regular solar panels and then they connect it to an inductive cooker that has a 600-watt lithium battery. And per family, it would cost $800 US or so. So it's free to use. I mean, well, they charge for it, but the fuel is free once you get it up. It has a lot of advantages. One of the things that from a waste-free 23 makes it a no starter is that it's an imported technology, developed in Europe, built in China or India or someplace, and shipped in. And that's how Europe and Asia and United States lives. But we also know that the way we live is not sustainable. So from a waste-free 23 standpoint, it's a no starter. And from the cost, it's a no starter. So that's why we're really focused on this final one on the left, which is using photovoltaic cells and then changing that into heat. And then we can store it very inexpensively. So we can cook anytime with it. The cost per family is very reasonable when you consider families spend that amount or more on fuel each year. So the payback is approximately 1 year on a strictly financial payback standpoint. No smoke. There's no cost for the fuel. Cook in the shade. You can do large or small meals because it's a community setting. And then all of it is built locally, except for the photovoltaic cells. So there's going to be a lot of ownership. If a community decides to do this, they're going to build it, they're going to learn from it, they're going to own it. The only thing that's really going to come from the outside is the photovoltaic cells, which I think we can all agree they're not going anywhere in the near future. So we'll be awash with them for many, many decades. Next slide. Um, so I think a big thing is there's no magic to this. Really, the only reason why we can propose this today is that the photovoltaic solar panels have dropped so much in price. And we're just taking advantage of that. So there really is no aha moment or some great scientific discovery. It's just the photovoltaic cells are so cheap that you can use them to create heat relatively inefficiently, but the heat stored in a way that's very efficient for this application. Next slide. Let's see, what does this one say? I think we've already covered this. Next slide. Okay, so how does it work in the specifics? And Jess has been bugging me for this for weeks. So there's photovoltaic cells, panels, which we all have seen. And you can use those as a roof for some shade structure, whatever you want to do. Basic wires running for those. All the power stays in DC and there's no significant batteries. So that makes the system a lot less expensive than a lot of other photovoltaic systems. And then that runs into a large block of insulation and like 10 feet by 10 feet by 10 feet or 3 meters by 3 meters by 3 meters. It's big block. And most of it is insulation. In the center of that insulation is something. Sand is probably most common, but it can be concrete or dirt or anything you want. And we're going to put the heaters in there, and then we're going to heat that up. And that's going to be the heat reservoir. And it will lose very little because of the huge amount of insulation that we're going to use. So next slide. So a little more clarity. So the block of heated material is 200, 250 degrees C. At those temperatures, anything can contain it. Concrete's fine. Then inside the insulation, we'll have a couple 100 liters of water. This can be scaled up or down. We haven't built any full scale units, so we don't know where the optimization is. But generally, for heat efficiency, the larger the better. There's just a lot of loss and cost with smaller. So as big as we can make the system to accommodate as many people as culturally is appropriate, it's going to be better and less expensive. So this bunch of sand or some material is heated to 200, 250 degrees C, and then it heats water to 100 degrees C. And then the water, when the cook wants to cook, they will come by and get the water. And then we also use the same heat to maintain the temperature of the water at 100 degrees C to continue the boiling. Next slide. So how do you build it? So 80, 90% of the labor and materials are local. So it's the local blocks, local glass, local plastic are all used for the structure and for the insulation. Local dirt is thrown into the middle cavity where we're going to put the heaters. The heaters are purchased, but they're very common. They're the exact same heaters that are in every electric cooker, every electric oven around the world. Super common, super reliable. And then a stainless steel tank of whatever size is appropriate, 200 liters, 100 liters, and that will contain the heated water. So all of that, 500 US dollars plus or minus, is the cost that will be sent off somewhere to buy these materials. But most of the material and all the labor is going to be local for this. Next. Then on top of that, we're going to enclose it with more insulation, more block. and then install the photovoltaic cells. They can be directly over this big block or, a ways away. It doesn't really matter. It can serve as a roof. This big block can also be part of a wall. So all this could be inside a kitchen. We just have some of it projected out, and then we add a tap to the 100-degree water. So the next. So step 3 is turning it on. So the solar panels, the way it's sized is the solar panels have enough heat on a cloudy day, or enough power on a cloudy day, to cook a basic meal for everybody. So to start the system, you'd let it run for a week, 10 days, 12 days, just depends on how sunny it is. And then that would save up a lot of energy, days and days of energy, into the sand and into the water. So that, with the plan being that when it averages out, if you have a few rainy days, or if it's, the wire breaks or something happens, it's not a catastrophe. There's still energy in the system to cook for 3, 5, 7 days is the plan. So how does it operate? I think we touched on this briefly. Is cooks come up, they'll, add the boiling water to whatever they're cooking for the day, and then it's not really shown on here because it kind of covers everything up, but we need a lot of insulation, because a big problem with cooking, any way we do it now, is most of the heat doesn't go into the food. Most of the heat goes into the space, radiates out, goes all over. So our focus here is conserving the energy we're collecting. So all this will be insulated well. And then on sunny, so this is all calibrated for, average days, cloudy days. On sunny days, we can have inductive cookers as well. And the community can easily fry, and because there'll be a huge abundance of electricity at that point during the day. So there'll be a lot of opportunity for frying and grilling on inductive cookers. Okay. The maintenance is trivial to zero. The photovoltaic cells last 20 years, the wires last forever. The heaters inside the sand should not fail. The rest is a few pipes, and that's about it. So there is no regular maintenance. There's no fuel costs. There's no ongoing expense, except for I think it's likely communities will have security. We'll have somebody working here just to manage access and keep track of things. And that can be a volunteer from the community or a paid employee, because the community is going to be saving, each family will save 50 cents, $1 or something per day. They previously spent on firewood. So there will be excess. I don't know if it's excess income, but there will be money that they may choose to spend a different way. So that's really up to the community on how they're going to manage it. Next. So once you put up all these solar cells, then lo and behold, you have an abundance of electricity. The electricity we put in to stop pollution, stop deforestation, and save the community money. But once it's there, lo and behold, you can have chargers. This could be a community center with TVs, with computers. You can even set up a microgrid, lighting. There's a huge amount of power. To make it 24-hour day power requires batteries, which are pretty expensive. But in the scope of things, considering the solar panels are being justified for cooking, it may be incrementally very inexpensive to set up some microgrid type solutions once all this is in place. Next. So the approximate economics, obviously this can change dramatically place to place. So the way we've sized this particular one is for 50 families, 300 people. It's going to be a pretty common number for schools, which are our first 3 installations. So now, plus or minus, they're paying $3,000 US a year for fuel. The purchase parts for this SHaCK is a little bit over 3,000 US dollars. And then there's the rest is local labor and materials, estimated at 2,000 US dollars. And there's zero cost for cooking fuel and maintenance and operating costs, except for labor and however a community chooses to do it. So the payback is very good. Any business person or bank or anybody else would realize that if you can get a capital return on your capital investment within a year, 2 years, and then have everything else beyond that as profit, that's a pretty good business. Next. So how to get started? As I said, there's 3 communities we're talking with now about moving forward. It's a big discussion with the community because this is not cooking in your home. So it's significantly different, except for schools and institutions. It's easy for them relative to communities. Leadership is critical, if not the most important thing. And then deciding how to pay for it. And then it's approximately 3 months. As you can see, the design is not too complicated. All the materials are readily available. And so I'd say it's safe to say 3 months by the time you say I'm really interested to finishing construction and starting to ramp it up. So that is my presentation. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer questions, and I'm right on schedule. Yay.
Well done, Dan. I do believe Carolyn had a question in the chat pod. Let's have a look at chat. Where are we? She mentioned that she already does solar cooking, and they've got little boxes, and I think the main issue for them is that they can't capture that energy. Let me just see the drawback is we can't store the energy and can only be used during the sunny days. My major concern is how to store the heat. So she's just running the box cookers. So
yes.
yeah.
I think they run into 2 issues, which we do too, which is one is you can't efficiently store the heat on a small scale. The only reason it works on a big scale is you can have a meter of insulation. You can just imagine everybody. The scale helps a lot on that efficiency. And then the other requirement for us is, we don't want to cut 30% of the wood consumption. We want to cut 100% of it. So the cook, 10% of the time, 5% of the time, 20% of the time with the solar cooking is great. But from a Waste Free 23 project that doesn't quite muster it. Plus, it's been done and done and done. It's done very well. So we're eager for this because it's 100% elimination of biomass for fuel.
Mm-hmm. I had a question, Dan. I just wondered about safety issues. So, for example, you've got this great big block. It's super hot. How it's
It's as hot as your cooking oven.
Right.
So it's equivalent to your kitchen now in your oven.
Right. And in terms of ventilation, what sort of ventilation is there going to be needed? Will we have to have open front and back of the room to allow that to be properly ventilated?
Well, the heat itself does not need any ventilation. The generation of the heat, there is no burning of fuel, and then there really isn't much radiant heat because we're battling that, because we're avoiding the radiant heat with the 3 meter thick of insulation. So really the only reason to have ventilation is for the cooking. If somebody's using a lot of spices, or you have 10 different pots boiling at the same time and no ventilation, it's going to get really steamy.
In a tropical environment. Yeah.
So I mean, it'll be significantly less than a wood burning environment, but it'll still, a sealed room with 10 liters of water boiling is going to be a bit much.
Yeah.
But I think from the communities I've been in, is ventilation is not an issue. It's actually the opposite. It's too much ventilation.
Right. Right. Okay.
A,
Um,
a question on the cost, Dan. The 3,500 SHaCK cost is that an FOB cost or a free on board, or there's X the
So
US?
all the materials are available in every country.
Ah,
So
okay,
there's really, and it's not unique to us or anybody. So there's standard photovoltaic cells, and then there's wires and a stainless steel tank. Um, so nothing's shipped in. Everything's probably available within 100 kilometers of any community we work with.
excellent.
Sonny has his hand raised. Sonny, you want to? Yep.
Yes, please. I want to ask, please, Dan, how
Yes.
suffocating is the community when it is time for cooking? And I want to know if the heat itself must be or should be inside maybe a hall or outside.
I'm sorry I could not hear every bit of your question. Did somebody else hear it all?
Yes. Okay, let me start. My question is, how suffocating is the community when they are cooking?
I'm sorry, how what is the community?
Please,
That's
let me
fine.
remove this. Yes, I'm asking how suffocating is the community when they are cooking?
How safe is that the question? Safe?
Yes, how safe
How
the
safe?
community
Right.
Yeah, so there'll be,
when they are
this is,
cooking, when they are cooking, especially when they are cooking.
yes. So there is nothing in this cooking process that is not done in every other cooking process around the world. Really, the only difference is instead of burning wood, which is much more dangerous, and the charcoals and burning down the house, and catching clothes and hair and everything else on fire, there's no fire. So there's nothing to catch. But there is hot water, which can burn people, but that's no different than cooking in the way everybody does now. Um, so that's really the only safety concern. But again, that's absolutely no different than any cooking that's done now around the world.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Tracy asked a question. She says, I'm not good with constructions, but I can get people making it. Can you have classes with them?
Uh, yes. Yeah, no problem. I'll come and help a little bit. But this is about any bricklayer will have no trouble doing this. It's about as easy a construction as you can do.
Tracy,
You will need, huh?
Tracy does some sustainable construction. Tracy, did you want to speak in from Kenya? Is it possible to have any type of building with this?
I think the easy answer is yes. Any normal building. Um, the building built out of the polyethylene trash plastic shouldn't be heated past 100 degrees C. So you need to be aware of that a little bit. Adobe, I think will be fine at extended periods at 200, 250 degrees C, but I am not an expert. I know concrete has no trouble at that temperature for years and years and years. I don't know what would happen to Adobe at that layer. Now, if you have concrete block right next to this hot sand and then Adobe, I'm sure that's okay. I just don't know what happens to Adobe at 250. Wood at 250, I wouldn't. It's just getting kind of close to its flammable temperature. But if it's half a meter away, it'd be no problem.
So the first ones that you're going to do are going to be prototypes. So you're going to be watching this process over time, just see how the buildings cope and how the system works.
Yes. I don't, they won't, I mean, I wouldn't describe them as prototypes, but regardless, we're going to monitor everything until there's thousands installed, and then we'll probably start ignoring them.
Okay. All right, we've got about
So the
5.
prototypes are all happening now in California and in Kenya, and a little bit in Pakistan.
Okay. And what is the process if people would like to become involved?
Well, I think it's, reach out to Waste Free 23. And then we really need to get the community aware of this solution. And I think it's very feasible to test it if there's any concern. Now, a school is just different because they already have the community kitchen. I mean, it's just the only difference is instead of spending $5 or $10 a day on firewood, there won't be that cost. So I think there's little risk on any cultural issue at a school or any institution. If a community is interested in it, which I hope they are, refugee camp or otherwise, because there's a lot of apartment buildings in Nairobi that are and around the world that are very interested, pretty much for the same reason. They're just spending a lot of money on fuel, and if they put photovoltaic cells on the roof, they have all the energy they need to cook. But before an installation, I'd highly recommend that we work to put in gas or some kind of other cookers and just have the community share a space to cook and just see if they're going to be happy doing that. Or I guess we could even do it with wood. You just have communal fires and they bring their pot and they cook, and just to make sure that they're going to be okay doing it. If there's a 80% reduction in firewood use, it's a win. If they're only going to use it once in a while, I don't think it's worth the investment of time and money.
It's interesting. I was looking at the article that Peter sent, actually the article that you mentioned earlier, and Peter sent that to me. And it mentioned in that article that men were more likely to be using these systems than the women. And I wondered whether there'd been some issues in the refugee camp in terms of women's safety or something along those lines. So it's interesting in the implementation to see how the communities are going to be using them, what sort of issues come up, safety issues or otherwise, to see how we can adapt designs and really encourage the most amount of people to use this. But yeah, I think that's
I
ongoing discussion.
would anticipate and strongly encourage that there is a full-time 24/7 person there, because there are items that could be damaged and stolen. And I think it just makes sense. And besides, there's so much money being freed up from cooking fuel costs that, hiring a person at a local living wage, I don't think will be a big impact, or a volunteer or something. But I think that would help both with security, but also with data collection. And then I'm sure the first 10 or 20 we're going to do will install some cameras and sensors to watch the temperature and how it's used, and because we have electricity and we have cell coverage, so that's all we need for a system to monitor it and record everything.
Sure.
Question, Jess, because we're talking about the school and the kitchen there and looking for economies of scale, and that also includes funding, supervision. Do you have any stats on the proximity of family groups to the actual school in distance?
For the specific project in Nakavale, we've got quite a number of, it's very close to the main street. And I don't have the stats on me, but it's a conversation we can have external. But yeah, we are anticipating quite a few families coming in. The groups are within fairly close proximity to each other. But yeah, we can talk. We've got less than a minute though. If anyone would like to get in contact with Dan, he's at Waste Free in 23 on Facebook. And Carolyn is already saying she's already got a community of women at the She Generators Perma Hub in Kenya, be willing to try this here because we're targeting every household using solar ovens. So
as long as you don't have any gender boundary issues between the men wanting to do all the cooking.
yeah, interesting.
As long as they'll do the dishes, it's okay.
But thank you so much, Dan. I'm sorry